I just feel so privileged being a grandparent.
Being the grandparent of 17 grandchildren, I almost feel that I'm 17 grandparent.
Grandchildren are, I suppose, they're a real joy in one's life.
I think there is a unique relationship between grandparents and grandchildren, a very special kind of love.
I suppose being a grandparent really means that you're old flesh and blood. Your grandchildren are part of that, and that you care very deeply for them, concerned for their future, concerned how they're growing up.
The innocent love that a grandchild has for its grandparents, and they run in with the arms out, to greet. So that's one of the things that makes life worth living.
I didn't know such a love existed until I had my grandchildren, and I have 10 grandchildren, and each one of them are different. They're so different.
Definitely being a grandparent is a journey of discovery, and discovering yourself as well, by discovering things inside of yourself and things that are important, things that you would have heard and really just dawn on you now, when you know things that my mother particularly would have said to me. And at the time I just said, yeah, but now I know what it means, and now I pass that on, both to my children and to my grandchildren.
You can actually devote more time to your grandchildren than you did to your children, because when your children are growing up, you're busy trying to make ends meet, you're busy trying to pay the mortgage, you're busy trying to pay bills, etc. And of course, when the grandchildren come along, a lot of the pressures that one was under when rearing children are gone, so you can devote more time to spoiling the grandchildren, and that means, I suppose, the parents have to deal with that spoiling that the grandparents have done.
I didn't realise until I became a grandparent that grandparents have a vocation. I didn't know. I thought only priests had a vocation. But I found out that grandparents had a vocation, and the vocation of a grandparent is to pass on the faith. And again, I didn't realise how difficult it would be to pass on the faith, because when we were children, we were on automatic.
I would like to divide it up into 3 age groups, as it were. Teenagers up to mid-20s, infants to teenagers, and pre-birth. Looking first at the pre-birth, we had 2 babies who didn't reach birthday. I have a special relationship with them. There's no bad side to it. I see them as my support in heaven. The next group, they give me great joy. This would be, say, from about 6 up to 16, on journeys. We bring them on journeys, and they're innocent, and it's lovely being with them. Not many downsides. I suppose one of the downsides is their energy levels. It can be such that it tires one, and maybe I'm to blame myself for that, encouraging them to show their energy. But so that's that group, and then the bigger group from the mid teens up to the mid-20s. I mean, they're adults in a way, and I enjoy their companionship, their friendship, and there are plenty of positive sides. But unfortunately, there's also the downside, and that is particularly where their values don't coincide with my values. And I'm thinking in particular of some of them may perhaps not practicing their religion, and that's sad enough. But on the other hand, there's a little expression in the Mass, someplace between the consecration and the Our Father, which says, "And their faith is known to God alone." You know that expression, and that's the way I look at those who have strayed a little.
People will immediately know the heartache that causes. But when your child comes to you and says, "Mum, I've decided that we're going to let them make up their own minds," it is the most difficult thing in the world to try and remain calm, loving, considerate, when you'd really rather knock their blocks off. I mean, it's very, very difficult to... and the response that you make to that is so important, because no matter how good a grandparent you are, and we are the preeminent collaborators in the upbringing and instruction of our grandchildren, no matter how good you are, you have to let the parents find their own way to bring up their own children. And that's what I call the art of being a grandparent, because you're there from that very moment when they come and tell you they're pregnant. And it might not be the way you expected to get the news. But once that child says to you, "Mum, I'm pregnant," your response is the first relationship you have with your grandchild. You become a grandparent from that moment on.
And in a Christian context, that would mean that you kind of care very deeply for their faith, and in a world which is very challenging for young people growing up, that they come out on the right side and make the right choices.
It's like when you're a parent, nobody gives you a book. When you're a grandparent, you don't really think about becoming a grandparent until you become a grandparent. This is something I think that needs to be looked at very carefully, and how to help grandparents through this transition period.
In our 14 grandchildren inventory, we would have some who have not been baptised. Parents have not had married outside the church, and yet they're wonderful parents, and they have lovely, lovely children. And we have a family whose marriage has broken down, and so we have grandchildren in that context too. And we see our commitment to all of these really in the sense of caring for them, loving for them, keeping them together, unconditional in our attitude of acceptance to all of them. And we would, my wife and I, every day start off our life, first thing in the morning, we pray for them. It's very difficult as a grandparent to intervene directly in circumstances like I've outlined. And I think that one hopes that simply by being there for them, showing your care and concern for them, looking after your grandchildren and making a fuss about them and hugging them and being kind to them and so on when you can, and bringing them together, all of these things that you're hoping that down the road sometime they will reflect on what really is important in life. And to my wife and myself, that would be the most important thing, would be really their faith values.
I'd be very happy with the fact that I do know if any of the children or grandchildren needed to talk to me, I would be open to listen to them. Now, maybe years ago, kind of before I had grandchildren, I would have been a judge maybe of different situations in other families. I confess, I would have been saying, I don't believe in that, I don't believe in this and all the rest of it. But from listening to other grandparents at our meetings, I would see where there are difficulties, and I just thank God so much that I have been spared all that.
Grandchildren don't owe their grandparents love in the same way that parents or the children owe their parents love. But yet, grandchildren are probably capable of displaying love to a higher degree. There's one instance, I remember my grandson, I used to pick him up from school when he was going to primary school, and I said to him, "Well, what did you learn today?" He said, "Nothing." I said, what was going on in school? So he got through what was going on in school. And then he'd ask me a question about something, and I'd tell him and say, "Do you know, Grandad, I think I should spend my time with you instead of going to school. I'd learn a lot more." And that was I suppose, a big boost to my ego, and I suppose also was an indication of the fact that he appreciated me.
If there's one thing I'd like to say, and it's this: unless you stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
My daughter lives next door with her family. There's 3 children there, 3 of our grandchildren. And they come in to me every morning, and I have my bedroom upstairs, and they come in and we'll say, "Oh, angel of God, my guardian dear, we'd say, Our Father, a Hail Mary, glory be to the Father, bless ourselves with holy water, and then they go off to school.
If the time is right, you say the Angelus at home, which we do. Sometimes the grandchildren look at us in surprise, and they stay silent, but that's their choice.
Pope Benedict wrote a prayer for grandparents, and he called the grandparents pillars of the church, great pillars of the church, and they are.
If there was one thing that I would like to pass on to people, it would be to be the best person you can be, to keep your faith, and also with love and generosity to pass on that to other people. And I would say example is best of all.
And there is something beautiful about taking your grandchildren to church and teaching them to light a candle and teaching them to pray in a simple way.
There are a lot of lovely books you can get children, depending on their age grade, to get them to read and to absorb some of the kind of spirit and faith of people that have gone before them.
So for me, prayer, the most basic form of prayer, is the most important thing you can pass on to your children, and particularly the sign of the cross. And if you have nothing else in the house but holy water, have holy water inside the door and splash them. Bless them when they come in and when they go out. Bless them at night time. Use as many symbols in the home as you can. But what gives me great hope, eternal hope, is what Pope Benedict said. He said that it was the little children who would bring the parents back to God.
I'd like to sum it all up in the words of Pope Francis, and that is, please, thanks, sorry. And I think that covers all the relationships.